All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. And welcome to the Voices of the Diaspora series by NoirUnited International. My name is Masiri Adibo Ashford, and I am the co-founder and co-executive director of NoirUnited International. And I'm happy to be co-hosting this event with my co-founder, Nasim.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nasim Ashford, co-founder of NoirUnited.
Right. So, if you are new here, I just want to give you all a little bit of background about Noir United and our work. So, we are a global development organization that has been focused on connecting Africa and the diaspora through community-based interventions. We started in Atlanta, Georgia in 2020 during the height of the global movement for racial justice, and we recognized that there was a synergy that was happening across different nations where African people of African descent, were facing a lot of systemic challenges that were rooted in the historical challenges of colonialism, slavery, of imperialism. And ultimately, we wanted to, create a space for development, humanitarian professionals, even just community leaders, those who are interested in community development overall, to kind of come together and have their voices be centered in development solutions. And so we started off with our first project back in 2020, supporting Black businesses to support the economic development of the community in Atlanta, Georgia. And then ultimately, we also did humanitarian work responding to the crisis in Ukraine, helping African students who faced racial discrimination while fleeing the war. And so now we are focused on engaging more African diaspora youth, more African diaspora members in general, to really have an impact on the policy space, on the development space, and play a greater role in that. And so now we're in a pivotal moment of time in history and a pivotal moment in where we are. No, depending on where you are, if you're in the United States, we all really know what's been going on here. But I think this is also a greater time for the diaspora as a whole and for African communities as a whole to come together and to um, exchange and experiences and acknowledge and knowledge and build community from there. And so just wanted to share that with you all about Noir United. We are happy to have you all here and excited that you all are interested in our Voices of the Diaspora series. So I'll pass it to Nasim to introduce the series and our speaker.
Thank you again, everyone, for joining. Again, my name is Nasim Ashford. And this speaker series, this Voices of the Diaspora speaker series, is aimed at highlighting activists, individuals, and other change makers that are within the African diaspora and bringing them to people who are the youth. Not only are we looking to engage members that are particularly just a part of one community, but our whole goal is to connect that youth African diaspora. And with that being said, we're happy to have Dr. Kwarteng here. I'm going to go ahead and read her bio. And yeah, so Dr. Kwarteng is a migration and diaspora specialist with 12 years of experience working in the international development space. She's also had the opportunity to work at academic institutions with policymakers and other civil society groups. She's currently a postdoctoral fellow or research associate at the SOAS Center for Pan-African Studies and holds a PhD in development studies from SOAS 2 at the University of London. Her work focuses on African migration and diaspora communities with a particular interest in second generation Africans and how they maintain connections to their countries of their heritage. Her work has been recognized with awards such as the Dudley Stamp Memorial Award from the Royal Geographical Society and inclusion in the future of Ghana's top 30 under 30. In 2024, she was selected for the Black Atlantic Residency at the Library of Africa and the Diaspora in Ghana. Kirstie has shared her research in a range of different spaces from TED Talk events to academic conferences and public panels as well. Thank you, Kirstie, for joining again. We're going to go ahead and ask you our first question, which is, to start us off, can you share a little bit about your background and what personally inspired you to focus your research on migration and diaspora engagement?
Yes, thank you for having me. It's really great to be here. I'm looking forward to sharing more about myself and my work. So yes, my background, I was born in the US to very wonderful Ghanaian immigrant parents. I was born in Northern Virginia, actually, and that's where I spent the first almost 10 years of my life. And then after that, my family did some internal migration. We moved to New York, Florida, then settled in Texas, where we've been for, I guess, the past 20 years. And then I myself did more more migration, going to school in Tennessee for undergrad, and did my master's in Vermont, where I returned back to the DC area to work, and I'm now living in London. And so I would say, just my experience growing up in a Ghanaian diaspora community was really what kind of led me into the career that I have now. Although at the time I didn't know that this was, growing up, I didn't know research was a thing. It's not something I really thought about. I thought I was going to be like a teacher when I started undergrad. Like that's really what I actually went to school for. And then realized about halfway through that, I respect teachers, but I don't think this is what I'm supposed to do. And then I really kind of stumbled into this into the kind of world of international development. But if I could do undergrad differently, I think I would have done this from the beginning.
No, I think that that's really great. Some of us also just stumble into the development sector and diaspora and migration, kind of similar to us. The way that we stumbled into it was responding to the crisis in Ukraine and looking at how diaspora communities migrated to Ukraine. We had no clue that there were Black people there while we were in graduate school. And so I think that leads me to my next question. Um, to our next question, which is, what are some of the experiences, whether that be personal, academic, professional, that help shape your understanding of the African diaspora and the role that we play in global development?
Yeah, so again, growing up in Ghanaian diaspora community, I knew, even though I didn't go to Ghana for the first time until I was about 12, but because it was, everywhere, my family, we went to a Ghanaian church growing up. My maternal grandmother lived with my family, my parents and my sister and I till I was 12, actually. It was when the family felt that it was time for her to return to Ghana, that my sister and I made our first trip. So I grew up knowing that there was, this other place that I had not seen, but materially I knew that I was because of the language that was spoken at home and at church. The foods were different, even, my middle name, my surname, even I knew that there was another place that I was from, and the you know the Ghanaian community, as a lot of communities do, people are sending remittances, or they're sending things of money or actual like clothes. They're sending things um, back to Ghana or to their country of origin. So that's how, on the personal side, that I knew that there was, that I knew that I was Ghanaian and I was part of a wider, African community, and that people are, even though they're away from their homelands, they're still engaging with their homelands. And then academically, I've always had this interest. I've been very curious about um, the differences, the intergenerational differences that exist in diaspora communities. Because I knew growing up that my experience was different. My parents are Ghanaian. I would say I am Ghanaian American. And so I knew that I was having a different experience, and people like me who were either born and raised in the US, or maybe came from Ghana or other African countries to the US when they were young. We're having our experiences, now we relate to the homeland, is different. And so as I, did went through undergrad and decided to do a master's in international development. For my master's thesis, we had the opportunity to kind of explore whatever we wanted to do, or to explore a topic that was of interest to us. And I was like, okay, well, I've always been curious about Ghanaian diaspora and how those of us who were, born and raised abroad, like how we relate to Ghana. And, so I explored what's going to happen to remittances when the first generation of the Ghanaian immigrants, when they either retire, if they retire to Ghana, or in the event they pass away, like, is the second generation, are we going to continue that tradition? And the answer was essentially no. that we will we will not be continuing that. And I also looked at identity as well as a part of that. And so after I finished my master's, I knew I wanted to take this. I wanted to continue this work. I wanted to continue exploring it, but I also wanted to take some time to work. So I worked, but the work that I did was not necessarily in diaspora engagement. It was kind of everything that I was doing on the side. And so this is when I was living in DC. I became a member of the Diaspora African Women's Network, which was started by Semhar Araya, which some people on the call may know. I also started the Nana Project, which is an online archive about preserving Ghana's history through the voices of Ghanaian elders. And so the academic kind of tied into everything is connected for me, right? So the personal tied into the academic, which tied into the professional, right? So in DC, in this space, I decide I want to continue the work that I started with my master's thesis and explore this in a PhD. And so that's what I did for my PhD, looking at second generation Ghanaians in London, New York City, and Accra, and kind of exploring the similarities and differences that exist in our experiences. Because again, I'm a very curious person. I've been asking. I was that one kid in class that would always be raising their hand and disturbing, asking all the questions. And so I felt that this was a really doing a PhD was a great opportunity for me to explore all the things about the diaspora experience that I had wanted to explore. And I knew that we were also to your point about uh, development, right? How the diaspora communities are engaging in global development. I knew that the young, the second generation, the younger generations, that we were also doing these things, but it wasn't being captured. It wasn't being talked about because how we do it is different from our parents' generation. And so in a lot of the literature, the academic literature, and even discussions, like, if you're around your aunties and uncles, oh, you people, you don't know anything about Ghana, you don't know this, you don't know that, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, we might not know everything, but we know enough to care and to act. And it's just that because there's differences in how we act, people thought that we weren't like, our connection is lesser, or like it's not as important. And I knew that was wrong. And so that's one of the things I set out to explore in my dissertation.
No, that is really interesting and eye-opening, especially as for myself, I'm I guess first generation or second generation Guinean American. My parents are from Guinea, and so a lot of the experiences you've shared are ones that are similar to me. I also grew up in a Guinean community in the U.S., and there's some things that I carry on, and there's some things that are American, of part of my identity. And so I think probably a lot of us think about how we're going to carry some of those traditions forward, or some of those key parts of our identity, and maybe share that with the next generation as well too. But yeah, thank you.
Can I just a point of clarification? So I know in the academic world, the term that academics use to talk about children of immigrants is second generation because they view the immigrants themselves as being first. But I know, like, in regular in the non-academic world, people refer to themselves as first generation, and neither is, for the record, like, neither is like right or wrong. It just is what it is. But I guess because I've spent a lot of time in school, you'll hear me say second generation, but know that we're like, if you say first gen and I say second, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about children of immigrants.
Thank you for that explanation. It definitely makes sense. Being that you've mainly focused a lot of your research on the children of immigrants, whether they be first generation or second generation, Oh, what would you say are some of your key findings or insights from this research?
So I'll just give three because of time. I could talk about my dissertation, my research all day. So since I did a multi-sided study, I found that there were actually differences in not in the type of engagement. I found that people, again, in New York City, London, and Accra, because there's also been like a resurgence of people returning to their country, I mean, generally returning to their country of origin, but returning to Ghana in particular. So I interviewed people who had been there for like 7 years at that point, and then people who are kind of in and out doing a bit of what we call circular migration. So they're in Ghana for a bit, and they're out, and then people who are just kind of there testing the waters, 3 6 months doing an internship. And so across all these three different cities, these different countries, second generation they were engaging in the same ways, right? So consuming Ghanaian media. So like watching Ghanaian news, listening to Ghanaian music, wearing Ghanaian clothing, eating Ghanaian foods. If they could speak the language, speaking the languages, trying to get involved in Ghana's development. So those were the kind of like the general, of course, investing, sending remittances. And so these were kind of like the general practices that people were engaging in across the three sites. But there were differences in how people engaged, like which ones were more prevalent. So I found that in London, the children of Ghanaian immigrants in that city were more likely to create formal organizations. So imagine like a NoirUnited, but like mainly only for Ghanaians. Those in New York were not really. They didn't organize. They organized, but not formally, and not around like their African or Ghanaian identities. There was mainly any formal organizing was done through religious institutions, so the churches and mosques. And then I found that people in New York and London felt they felt like, yes, Ghana is our homeland. It is our duty and responsibility to develop, Mother Ghana. But those that had relocated to Ghana actually felt very jaded about their ability to work to support Ghana's development. With one participant, he even called it messianic baggage. Like we come to Ghana feeling that we have, that we're coming to save the country, and then we get really frustrated when we find out that there's barriers, there's different issues as to why we can't, they can't come and do all the grand work that they thought that they would be able to do. So people, I mean, they're still working, but they're working in more siloed, I guess, in more siloed spaces. So I thought that was one of the differences, just the differences in how people engage based on their geographic location. And then I also found that there were differences in engagement based on where people were in the life cycle. And I think this is really important to bring up when we talk about children of immigrants, because again, people are saying, oh, we're disconnected. We don't want to engage in all of that. But if someone is like 18, 19, they might not have the money to like be going to Ghana or going to their country of origin as frequently as they wanted. So I saw that when people were younger, their engagement with Ghana was really tied to what their parents were doing. So if their parents had money, then their parents would send them to Ghana, or they were going to a Ghanaian church or a Ghanaian mosque because their parents were going, or they're going to hometown association meetings and things because their parents are going, essentially. And then they get older, they go to uni, they join the African Student Organization at their school, they graduate, they start earning money, and that's when you kind of see people doing more direct engagement. They're also trying to now find organizations like NoirUnited or Dawn or Project 1957 here in London, trying to find like-minded Ghanaians or Africans to connect with. And I think the internet is also been a big part of this as well. It's just a lot easier to connect with people. It's a lot easier to learn about what's going on in Ghana or your country of heritage, and to make connections transnationally as well. And then the last finding I want to share is actually about remittances. So remittances were actually the most contested form of engagement across all the field sites. People felt either very strongly for or against sending remittances. And those who were for it were like, if people need the money, then let me just send the money, like no long thing, like just send the money. But others were like, no, like I don't want people to view me as a like an ATM, just thinking that whenever they need their money, they can just ask me. I would rather do something that would give people skills, or give people skills so they can make their own money, or do something like collective where like if I send money, like it makes a wider impact, or do investing. So yeah, I think in this day and age, we actually really need to be paying be paying attention to that, because as you know, I know migration is still ongoing, but there is or at least in the Ghanaian context, a very established diaspora community that people are relying on for remittances, and so there could be some changes in the not too distant future, if we're not really taking these things into consideration.
Yeah, I think that your comment about the remittances is definitely one that is of great interest right now. Um, because, you know, remittances is a hot topic. People are trying to think about how maybe like with the end of USAID and like all these like new foreign aid cuts, now we're trying to think about different ways in which we can fill that gap and and think about innovative ways to finance development on the continent too. So I guess that leads us to our next question, which was also about remittances. But like beyond sending money, right? What else could remittances represent for the future of African diaspora engagement? And then like how can we reimagine remittances as a tool, as a strategic tool for transformation on the continent?
I don't I don't know if it's remittances, I guess, unless it's remittances broadly defined that we need to reimagine. Because remittances are sent with a very specific purpose, right? It's because people need the money you know, for consumption, right? They're buying food, school fees, healthcare, house payments, things of that nature. And so I don't know if it's a reimagining of remittances per se, or if we need to just be thinking about and like investment. Like I know in that like investments or like collective remittances. I know diaspora bonds are things that are trying to be or things that are people are discussing. But I think I don't we will probably always need remittances because people back home will always need money for one thing or another. So I don't know if it's reimagining remittances as much as it is maybe creating different types of pathways for people to give like for people to give money. Like so thinking about Ethiopia, I don't remember the specifics, but I know they were able to mobilize the diaspora in some capacity to fund a dam. The Ethiopian government was able to do this. And so thinking about using remittances to kind of cushion the fall of the windfall from the lack of aid. I don't think I don't think it's as straightforward as people are kind of making it seem, because remittances are in fact sent for a very, very particular purpose. And so I think we need to, I don't know if it's reimagining remittances, but I think creating new ways for people to give, creating collective ways, making it easier for people to invest. I think it's going to be it doesn't have to be a either or, and I think that's kind of how the conversation has been like framed. I think it can be a both. It can be a both and, because it will be a both and it currently is actually a both and, because people are sending remittances and also still investing into cocoa farms, or all different types of business. I say cocoa farm because that's how I'm a Ghanaian, and so that's what a lot of the land that's used for in Ghana is used for, agricultural development. So yeah, I think we need to. I think we need to. I think yeah, we need to rethink how we think about remittances generally. I think the conversation needs to reflect the actual reality of how and why diasporas are sending money and what they're sending it for. Yes, there's remittances are there, but investment is also there. It's just that it's a lot harder to track diaspora investments. There's tons of tools that are out there that can track remittance payments, but for diaspora investments or diaspora trade, it's not quite as straightforward. So I think, yeah, I think there's a lot to really capture the full breadth of how diasporas are engaging financially. I think there's a lot of new systems really do need to be created so we can have like more accurate conversations.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. That's something that we're also looking at as well too, when looking at how can we mobilize the youth to actually have impact on the continent, whether it be financial, whether it be time and education, giving back to their communities. One thing that we were able to do, as we've already talked about, was actually like us as the youth respond to a particular crisis that was impacting the community. And so as far as what's happening on the continent, what we want to know is, can you tell us any examples in other areas where youth particularly are leading this type of investment, even if it's not remittances, but on the ground work, what's actually happening?
Yeah, on the ground, there's actually a lot going on in a lot of different spaces. In my bio, you read that I was resident at the Library of African Diaspora last year, and so being able to be a part of that, and it was the inaugural I guess residency or fellowship for that, and um, it was a mix of people from the diaspora and from the continent, from Ghana in particular. And so in the creative space, and I think this is a place that's often overlooked when we talk about diaspora anything, really, because we were talking, thinking about trade investment, money, people like money, people need money. So that's like where the conversation around diaspora engagement normally begins and ends. But I think the creative space, the creative sector, there's a lot that is actually happening there. So on a personal level, being able to be in a space where we were interacting with, African writers, African diaspora writers, and just like writing, we're sharing our work, living in community together. And then we also had the opportunity to go to different, historical sites in Ghana. So we went to Cape Coast and Elmina slave castles. We also went to the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana, and just other places, Jamestown, and other places in Accra and in southern Ghana. And so that's one way. And then also my work with the Nana Project, I've been able to do record interviews with elders in the US, the UK, and as well as Ghana. And so I think the creative space and the creative space, creative sector is a key way, and I think a really important way to for people in the diaspora to connect with people on the continent. And that's really already happening. And then even in the creative sector, because again, at the end of the day, people do like people need money, people like talking about money. There's also a lot of there's in my dissertation, I actually called it an identity economy. That I believe that young diasporans or young people in the African diaspora community are creating based out of their desire to connect. So thinking about, weddings, people are, getting important kente from Ghana, or they're then sending the kente back to have someone in Ghana make it, right? Thinking about WizKid and Burna Boy selling out Madison Square Garden. Like that's, in my opinion, that is the direct influence of the coming of age of children of African immigrants, and at the same time as the coming of age of children of African immigrants, coupled with the rise of the digital age as well. So because of that, people are, again, as I said earlier, the connections are able to happen a lot quicker. Even thinking about food, right? So there's of course the Africa stores that we go to when we need our plantains and corned beef and other things that we use. But children of immigrants, there's are creating restaurants. The recipes that we've been using, that we grew up eating, right? That have been in our families, in our communities for ages now. We're now creating whole, DC, Elmina, right? So the creative sector, I think, is really a really underestimated way of or yeah, underestimated space of diaspora engagements.
No, I love the point about the creative space and the creative sector because I think we've seen over the past couple of years with the rise of Afro beats, like a renewed interest in African culture and African history and just the
Mm-hmm.
vibe of being African and that being shared across the world really. And like we've seen it with, I think, even the Afrofuture events that bring
Mm-hmm.
lots of young people back to the continent for an experience that they wouldn't have anywhere else. Now that I think they're bringing it to the United States now. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think yeah, with all of those initiatives, the year of return,
Mm-hmm.
diasporas play a huge role in like tourism and fueling that. So I think it's really cool to see how the creative industry is fueling that, and I'm excited to see where how it'll continue to unfold. But I think this brings me to our next question, which is looking at the importance of for members of the African diaspora to whether there be second generation immigrants or even just members of the diaspora, African Americans, Caribbeans. Why is it important for them for all of us really to connect with the continent?
Mm-hmm.
And what thoughts do you have there on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's important because home is home, you know? And I think thinking about, conversations that have been going on as of late, especially with the end of USAID, where some people view it as a good thing, right? Because they're like, oh, no more foreign influence or, foreign propaganda, or if you will, in Africa, like, Africa for Africans. And okay, yes, sure, but at the same time, like if we want an Africa for Africans, then we need to be involved, right? We can't complain about um, people meddling in our affairs if we also aren't meddling in our own affairs. And so I think for that reason, it's important for anyone of African descent, whether they are descendants of recent immigrants or if they are several generations removed, if they have the desire, because I know for one reason or another, not everyone may have the desire to really connect. But if they have the desire and want to see the continent and its people prosper, then it's important to get involved. And there's different ways of getting involved. There is a framework. I forgot the name of it. Social. I think it's called like the social change framework, and it had all these different ways in which people can get involved. Right. So you have the people who are into direct agitation or direct action. You have the storytellers. You have healers. There's all different types of ways in which people can get involved. So I think it's really just about finding your lane and doing and then doing the work in that space.
Nice. Um, all right. Let me pull Nassim back up.
Okay. So you talked about the disconnect that some people might have when it comes to the continent. However, there are some people who are in the diaspora who want to connect to the continent, but it feels distant or unclear. So, what advice would you have for people who are emerging leaders, members of the diaspora that really want to make a meaningful impact? What would you tell them? Where would you tell them
Hmm.
to start? And how would you tell them to engage?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say try to be as informed as you can about what's going on. I would say maybe begin in your country of origin because if we say, I mean, there's 54 countries in the African continent. So it's difficult to really stay up to date on everything that's going on. So maybe start with, I guess, you start local, however you define that, right? So local can be your country of origin. Fine, there's always, there's news outlets I know in Ghana, there's City FM, My Joy. There's even, Ghana Web. Those who are Ghanaians will know Ghana. There's, Ghana Web. Those different types of websites that you can go to stay informed. And then, of course, there's social media. A lot of these news outlets are also on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. So do what you can, number one, to stay informed about what's going on in your country of origin. And number two, community, like find community. If you are, involved in if you're a religious person, finding people in your religious community that share your background. I mean, there's African or Ghanaian churches and mosques all up and down the U.S. and here in the U.K. as well. So I think if that's another space in which you can make connections with people that are probably doing something. Even the church or the mosque itself might even have programs and things that they're doing in your country of origin that you could get involved in. And then finding organizations like NoirUnited, right? Or finding youth-led organizations, or even if it's not like a formal organization per se. People have sent me so many, like, my friend is raising money for her mom's like hometown, like for her like elementary school, or another friend is they're raising money. They're trying to send money for to give girls period projects like in their father's hometown. So getting like there's all these kind of like piecemeal, organizations are good, and like if you can organize formally, I do believe that's important. But the informal work that goes on is also just as important. So yeah, so I would say start local, stay informed about what's going on in your country of origin, and join communities, make a community if you need to, or make an organization, and then get involved in the ways that you can. Again, like find your lane and find your community and do the work in that space.
No, thank you for all of those really insightful thoughts and comments. I think even to your points about like why members of the diaspora should be engaged and how they should be engaged is really key here because I mean this is something that's always being said, but by 2050, the African population will reach what 2.5 billion people, and that will take up a huge percentage of the global population. And there is like a race to be engaged, whether that be from, the diaspora or other foreign actors, whether from Europe, from Middle East, from Asia. And so I think it's really important for us to keep in mind, that Africa is the future, right? And that's something that I always like to remind ourselves. Africa is the future, and there's different ways for us to get engaged. And I like your point about engaging with your local communities or just supporting local communities. Like we have NoirUnited has a project that we're doing right now, which is we have two projects actually, which is to support a water well project in Guinea Conakry. There's a village there that didn't have access to clean water, and it's the month of Ramadan. So that was one of the challenges. And so we partnered with an African diaspora group the ASA at American University to fundraise there. And we're also fundraising through our own networks to support a school in I think it's in Nimobi, Ghana as well. So kind of in the central area in Accra. And so those are the kind of initiatives that we're taking. And I think it's definitely in alignment with what you're doing as well. So I'd like to end off with the last question about what gives you hope about the future of the African diaspora and the future of African development.
I think what gives me hope is I think organizations like yours, there's always the fact that every generation like is involved in their own way, right? I think, yeah, every generation is involved in their own way, and I think it can be, especially what's going on right now, it can feel really overwhelming and really like, oh my gosh, like what are we going to do? But if there's anything Africans or Black people more broadly have done, like it's been, resisting and being resilient regardless of what has happened, what has happened. And I think that's what we will continue to see. I know there's a lot of talk about the reimagining and, creating new systems. And I think that will happen on the higher level, but like on the kind of like the grassroots, like the local level, I think we'll see it happen much quicker just because out of necessity, right? They said, what is necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so because we are like in a place where we by force have to shift, like we're going to see that shift happen, I think, pretty quickly. Like on the I think like I'm really curious to see how things are by the end of the year. And so I think it's that spirit that regardless of what happens, like we will keep on keeping on. That's what gives me hope. And the fact that people are like they see this like the US aid and the cuts and stuff and not solely as a threat. I mean, it can be viewed as a threat, but people are seeing it as an opportunity. And I think it is an opportunity. And so the fact that people are kind of see this and they feel invigorated to like, okay, yeah, like we're going to figure this out. We're going to figure out the next thing. And we're going to keep doing what we're doing. It's going to look different, but the work that we're doing will continue. And the continent and its diaspora will continue to develop and thrive. Like that's really what gives me hope.
Beautiful. I think that's great. And yeah, you're right about USAID, the USAID kind of being not just like a setback, but an opportunity. And I think that that's something that African people have innately, like just looking at things from a more positive outlook. And so I'd like to stop right here. Those are all the questions that we've had.
Thank
And
you.
I'd like to thank you for your incredible insights and just open it up to anyone who has a question for Dr. Kwarteng. The floor is yours now. So feel free to come off of mute or raise your hand. Beza, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I think your reflections on, the diaspora identity and responsibility really hit home. Um, my name is Beza. I'm an Ethiopian immigrant. Um, and it's funny because I was going to say I'm Ethiopian American, but I do still struggle with the American part. And that kind of ties in with the question I was going to ask, which is
Hmm.
I immigrated to the US when I was 8 years old. So I often feel like I exist in this in-between space of not quite first generation, but not
Hmm.
second generation either. So it's like that 1.5 generation.
Hmm.
And I was wondering if you explored that at all in your research, those of us who moved from the continent at a young age and engaged with our countries of heritage kind of differently from those born in the diaspora,
Hmm.
because I often find myself, torn between that strong emotional memory of home, but also the socialization I've had here in the US. And I
Hmm.
also think, you brought up remittances and or even like the broader contributions like supporting development efforts or preserving culture. And
Hmm.
I feel like those of us born here, born on the continent versus born in the diaspora, we don't always fit in that binary of either being fully invested like our parents, but I don't know if I've ever felt that distance that some
Hmm.
second generation peers talk about.
Hmm.
And yeah, I guess I just wanted to know, how do you see this 1.5 generation shaping or even redefining diasporic responsibility, especially in this moment with younger Africans abroad, questioning traditional models and trying to build something more reciprocal?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's an excellent question. I didn't explore, so as you rightly said, and at least in the academic space, we call people that moved, emigrated from their homeland to another place when they were still young as 1.5. And there's, as you also said, it's a different experience because you do have an embodied knowledge of your country of heritage because you live there. Like, and there's like memories, there's this because you live there in a way that some second gens might not have. Although I will add that it's not uncommon for some second gens to spend some time when they're young in their countries of origin. Sometimes their parents will send them, not because they were, bad, like that does happen, but because their parents just want them to spend some time in their homeland. But for if you want to, I would say I didn't explore 1.5 in my research directly, but I do have a very good friend of mine. Her name is Rita Nketia, and she herself is 1.5. She actually moved to the UK, to Canada, excuse me, when she was 18 months. Actually, she was and then she's the youngest of, I think, of four or five siblings. And so, and it's really interesting for her If you read her work, I think her dissertation is online. It's long, you don't have to read the whole thing, but at least skim through it. I think it'll give you some really interesting information. And then I think there's another, one of my, a woman I used to work for, Bashir Ahmed. I believe her work also looked at 1.5 and second generation diaspora. And she looked specifically at the Horn of Africa, like how 1.5 and second gens engage in the Horn of Africa. So I think you would also find, maybe I can like send I can send you like the names and maybe the links to their work if I can find the work, but at least their names so you can read more about about what they've done. So yes, it is, as you said, it is a different experience, but I think it's a joint experience. I think there's some differences, but there's all between 1.5 and second, but there's also, I would say, some similarities as well. And so in the spaces that I've been in, it hasn't solely been second gen. It's been 1.5 and even first generation people who come, maybe a lot of people come from the continent to study or they come to work. So we're in these young diasporic spaces. It isn't solely the second gen. I think we're all working together. And I think to your point about how can 1.5s be involved in the kind of like the reimagining of this post USAID world. I think they're doing the work that I guess a lot of the younger generations are doing. Like we're all doing it. I think we're all doing it together. We're doing it in partnership. If anything, they might have a leg up because if they have maybe more direct connections, especially if they went to school. So they have like maybe a primary school or a secondary school that they still have ties to because they're part of like an alumni association. That's something that second gens might not be able to have, but they can bring that capital as a form of bring that capital with them into their diaspora communities and share that knowledge with second gens or people that might not have those direct connections in the work that they do.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Basil, for the question. Oh, go ahead, Nassim.
I was going to say the same thing. But do we have any other questions? Yes, you can go ahead, Maya.
Thank you so much for being here today and sharing about your research and your expertise. It's been wonderful to listen and learn. So my name is Maya. I am African American. So my family has been, here several generations with very, very, very loose connections to the continent. So like we don't really know. So I do appreciate you speaking on the importance of like reconnecting, even if, we're not like first or second generation. I am curious about if your research looks at sort of like the experiences of people who don't really, I don't want to say don't have a connection, but aren't aware. I'll say aren't aware of their connection. And then later on, like rekindle that or explore that. And I guess my question comes from maybe sometimes people have an expectation of like what that reconnection will look like, and then maybe it feels a little bit different. So I'm wondering if you maybe could say more about that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up because that's really important. I wouldn't say like my work really did focus mainly on the children of Ghanaian immigrants, so I didn't explore anything outside of those boundaries. But I think there can be some similarities with the second gen experience and maybe the African American or the historic diaspora experience, and that not everyone that I interviewed felt they knew they were Ghanaian, but they didn't. Not everyone was like wanted to move back, or felt really compelled to get involved in development projects and things that were going on in the continent. They were, and that was fine for them. Yeah, so I think its engagement can be on I guess a bit of a continuum. But I think for people that maybe want to get you know have a better connection if they feel disconnected, like I said, I guess if you're from a specific country diaspora, then it's easier, you know, just like I said, going and finding people in your community, you know, finding things online. But I think if you're a bit you're, you know, several generations removed, it can be challenging. But I know that African countries, especially, you know, Ghana, the year return, I know Nigeria has tried. I think Sierra Leone, Burkina Faso is even now doing citizenship, you know, opening citizenship up for people from the historic diaspora. So there's, I would say, in this day and age that we are in, there are there's more pathways like that I think African countries are trying to create for people from the historic diaspora to connect. But as you said, there can be there's the expectation and then there's the reality, right? And I think this is something that people from both the, I guess, continental diaspora and the historic diaspora can experience when if they're going to the continent directly to try to engage, to whether it's for a visit or to relocate or to, you know, work on a project. There's, you know, you aren't always perceived in the way that you would hope to be. Sometimes you come hoping people will see you as like as a fellow countryman, right? Like, or countrywoman, and they see you as a foreigner and as an outsider. You know, in Ghana they say "Obroni," like white person, and that can be frustrating, especially if that's not something that you're expecting. But that is the part of the reality of diaspora engagements, and there's, you know, we do have certain privileges, especially depending on where in the world you are, like, you're based. So US, UK, Canada, if you're in a G7 country, geopolitically you are privileged, even if you don't have privilege in your country, if you're, you know, working class or have other, you know, racially marginalized, all of that, yes. But if you go to Ghana, simply because of where you're from, because of the currency that you can earn in, it will give you privilege in ways that may make you a bit uncomfortable, but that's a reality. So I think there's you know, nothing is ever what is it? I mean, every opportunity comes with challenges, right? And so, but those challenges are things that can be overcome. Because like I said, I was able to interview a whole bunch of people in Ghana that had relocated, second gens, and there's even a very thriving historic diaspora community. The African American Association of Ghana has been there since the 1990s. The Ghanaian Caribbean Society has been there since 1961. I didn't know that till just this week, right? So even with the challenges that can come with reengaging, like, people are doing it. So it is possible to overcome the challenges.
Thank you for mentioning the African Caribbean Association in Ghana. My grandfather, who's from Jamaica, he actually went to Ghana in the 1930s and was actually trying to connect back with our family and everything like that as well too. So there's definitely a lot of connections all over the diaspora.
I think we have one more question from Regina.
Hi, I realize we're getting close to time. Dr. Kwarteng, thank you for your talk. I'm curious, what are your future projects? What are you working on now? What's next for you? Thank you.
Thank you. What's next? I want to say writing. I really do need to be writing more about writing more about my work, about my research. That's something I want to. I have, when I was in Ghana, I actually started my book proposal, so I need to finish that. I need to be getting journal articles out there. But yeah, it's really just, I feel like now is, especially with everything that's going on, now is really the time to be waving the flag of, like, younger segments of diaspora in their engagement. So the things I will be writing about will be related to that. I also do have an Instagram page. I'm trying to also not to share share my research, but also share it in the context of everything that's going on with migration in the US, in the UK. Like, it's happening all over the world. We're seeing migration, like the impact of migration and migration policy. Things are changing very rapidly. So doing what I can to be a public scholar as well, and breaking down the information that's out there in ways that people can understand, and relating it specifically to the African diaspora context. And then, of course, doing speaking, doing doing more events. I was just did an event last week with my colleagues at the SOAS Center for Pan-African Studies on the 8 cuts and the role of the African diaspora in supporting the continent and how we can be supporting each other, because that also has an impact on diaspora communities as well. So yeah, just continue to watch this space.
Thank you. Thank you. So on that note, we will begin wrapping up the conversation now. We really appreciate you, Dr. Kwarteng, for coming to speak with our group. And for everyone that joined, we appreciate you for joining as well. This African Diaspora Voices of the Diaspora series that we're hosting is something that we plan to do once a month from now until the end of the year. And so we encourage all of you all that are here to join next month as we host our next speaker and continue to engage with our programming. Outside of this, we're planning to really be on the ground and hoping to build a community of people who are interested in the African diaspora and wanting to engage themselves as well too. So you all can check out our website for the recording and as well as checking out other things that we post on there as well too. It's NoirUnited.org. Very easy to remember. If you remember the name of the organization and yeah, you'll be able to find all of our videos and content on the website. And I'll pass to Ms. Seri in case you want to give us any last words.
No, I think that's it. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Kwarteng, for your incredible insights. This was a very informative discussion, and I think that your research is really timely and really important for us as a community. And so, yeah, we're going to share this out, and I think more people should know about your work, and more people should know about the role that they can play on the continent and also just throughout the diaspora in their own communities. And so. Yeah, I just want to say thank you again, and I wish you the best of luck as well too as you continue forward in your journey. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this time. Thank you for this platform.
all right. Well, you all, we dropped Dr. Kwarteng's Instagram in there. How can people stay in touch with you?
Yeah, so this page, also my LinkedIn, is just if you search my name on LinkedIn, it will come up. Those are the best ways to to get in touch with me.
All right. Well, yeah, you can find her on LinkedIn. And so, yeah, we look forward to staying in touch, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening. Thank you,
Thank
everyone, for
you.
joining.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.